Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The air was thick with perfume, champagne, and the hum of slow jazz when Amara walked into the exclusive rooftop party that evening. It wasn't her scene. She had only come as a favor to her best friend, who worked with the event's catering company. The venue was filled with people dressed in glimmering outfits and polished shoes, clinking glasses and exchanging hollow laughter. Amara wore a simple black dress, her curly hair piled high on her head. She kept to herself, sipping from a small cup of fruit juice and planning to leave early. But fate had other plans. That was when she saw him, Jidenna Okwudili. He stood near the edge of the balcony, city lights framing his tall silhouette, dressed in a charcoal suit that hugged his frame like it was made for him. His watch gleamed, his posture screamed power, and his smile, when it found her, disarmed her entire being. They didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her, almost as though he recognized something familiar in her soul. When he finally walked over and spoke, his voice was calm, deep, and respectful, not like most men who tried too hard. They talked for hours, unaware of the time slipping by, their connection too magnetic to ignore. By the time the party died down and people began to leave, it felt like they had known each other for years. He asked if she wanted to take a walk, and she said yes. They strolled the streets of Victoria Island under the moonlight, laughing about everything and nothing. Amara found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone, about her dreams, her fears, her struggles after her father's death. Jidenna didn't judge or interrupt. He just listened, truly listened, as if every word she said mattered. He shared his own battles, how he built his company from scratch, how success had come at the cost of peace, how even with all his wealth, he still felt alone. There was no pretense between them. When he gently reached out to hold her hand, she didn't resist. When he kissed her near a quiet corner by the sea, she didn't stop him. And when they returned to his hotel suite in a moment of mutual yearning, it felt less like lust and more like two lonely souls trying to find warmth, if only for one night. It wasn't planned, it wasn't rushed, it was emotional, tender, and real. For the first time in a long time, Amara felt seen. But by morning, all that warmth turned cold. Amara woke up alone in the lavish bed, the crisp hotel sheets still warm from the night before, but the room empty. At first, she thought he had gone to get breakfast or take a call, but as minutes turned to an hour and then two, reality began to set in. His wallet was gone, his suitcase gone. Even the little card with his number she had seen by the dresser was no longer there. Panic crawled into her chest. She tried asking the receptionist for help, but they told her they couldn't give out guest information. She left the hotel confused, embarrassed, and heartbroken. Over the next few days, she searched for him online, on social media, in news articles, but it was like he'd vanished. Her heart told her that their night had meant something, but everything else screamed otherwise. A few weeks later, she began to feel sick, tired, and dizzy. A test confirmed it. She was pregnant. And from that moment on, her life would never be the same again. The days after Amara found out she was pregnant were a blur of fear, hope, and helplessness. She had no one to turn to, no one to confide in. Her mother had passed away years ago, and her father's distant relatives barely acknowledged her existence. Alone in her small one-room apartment, she stared at the pregnancy test stick like it was a death sentence. The only man she had ever been intimate with was Jidenna. It wasn't just that he had money. It was the way he made her feel seen, the way he listened, the way he touched her like she was precious. But now he was nowhere to be found. She revisited the hotel, begged the receptionist, even tried to bribe a cleaner just to know if he had left any trace. But all efforts proved useless. She searched his name online and saw multiple articles celebrating his business milestones and magazine covers flaunting his lifestyle. He was everywhere, yet unreachable. There was no email, no phone number, nothing she could use to connect with him. It was like he had deliberately wiped their night together from existence. But for Amara, that night had created a heartbeat inside her, a child that would soon change everything. As her belly grew, so did the whispers. Her neighbors began to notice. Questions turned to assumptions, and soon, assumptions turned into insults. Another foolish girl carrying bastard children, one woman murmured at a community borehole. Even her landlord, a previously polite elderly man, started avoiding her and demanded rent in full, not caring about her condition. Amara had to quit her front desk job at a mini hotel when her uniform could no longer hide the swelling in her midsection. She tried to start a small food business with the little savings she had, but Lagos wasn't kind to the vulnerable. Some days, she sold nothing and went to bed hungry. Yet, she refused to let bitterness take root. She often stood in front of the mirror, placed her hand on her belly, and whispered promises to her unborn child. I will never leave you like he left me. I will be enough for you, even if it kills me. She sent letters to every known address associated with Jidenna's company, office headquarters, media team, charity branches, but got no replies. She started to believe that maybe he had read them and chosen to ignore her. That hurt more than being left behind. Eventually, Amara gave birth on a stormy Thursday morning with no one by her side. The nurses were cold, the hospital poorly equipped, and she had to borrow money to pay her bills. But the moment she held her baby boy, all the pain, all the abandonment, all the shame melted into love. She named him Jaden, a name that combined parts of hers and Jidenna's. It was the only piece of the man she had to give her son. Jaden grew quickly, his features striking and familiar, strong cheekbones, soft brown eyes, and the same charming dimple on the left cheek, just like his father. Every time Amara looked at him, her heart ached. He was a perfect reminder of a man who had vanished, but also the proof that their night wasn't meaningless. And even though she hated that she had to struggle, hated that she had to explain to a growing boy why he didn't have a daddy, she never once stopped praying that one day, somehow, Jidenna would know the truth. Raising Jaden without a father was like fighting a storm with bare hands. Amara quickly realized that society wasn't kind to single mothers, especially those without support or status. The whispers didn't stop after she gave birth. They grew louder, more vicious. Mothers at the daycare judged her silently. Teachers at Jaden's school looked at her with thinly veiled pity. Children sometimes mocked Jaden, calling him the boy without a daddy. And although Amara tried to shield him from the emotional bruises, some days it broke her completely. Why don't I have a daddy like the other kids? He had asked on his 5th birthday, after watching his best friend's dad lift him into the air. Amara smiled weakly, pulled him close, and said, Your daddy is a great man, Jaden. He just doesn't know about you yet. But her soul wept inside, knowing that no child deserved to feel incomplete because of one parent's absence. Even when she tried to date again, men either saw her as damaged goods or someone to take advantage of. So she gave up on love and doubled her hustle. To survive, Amara took every legal job she could find, laundry girl in Lekki, food vendor assistant, online reseller, and sometimes even helping kids with their homework for small pay. She rarely slept and hardly ate enough, but she made sure Jaden never went to bed hungry. At night, when the city dimmed and silence fell over their one-bedroom apartment, she would hold him close and read him stories, even if she was half asleep herself. Jaden was a brilliant boy, curious, kind, and full of questions. He loved to draw and was always sketching little versions of a tall man in a suit, saying, This is my daddy. I think he wears suits like the men on TV. Amara would fight tears and say, Yes, baby, he does. Some nights, she'd pull out a newspaper clipping of Jidenna's old magazine cover and stare at it silently. She didn't keep it for love. She kept it for justice. She believed in her heart that the truth had to come out someday, somehow. But even hope has its limits. One particular day, after being insulted by a customer and fired from yet another job because she couldn't make it on time, Amara sank to the floor of her room and cried until her body trembled. What did I do to deserve this, God? She whispered through sobs. She had given everything, her dreams, her body, her dignity, for one night of affection. And what she got in return was abandonment and hardship. People labeled her foolish, called her a whore, and said she was just another girl who opened her legs for money. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know she fell for a man who made her believe in connection. A man who vanished without a goodbye. And as much as she tried to hate him, She couldn't. She just wanted answers. Wanted her son to be seen, acknowledged, loved. She didn't need money or fame. She just wanted the man who created Jaden to know that his absence was leaving scars that couldn't be erased. 7 years passed, and though the world barely noticed, Amara had transformed. She had grown tougher, wiser, and more determined. Her business selling packed meals to offices in Victoria Island had finally picked up, thanks to a kind woman who once tasted her jollof rice and decided to invest. Amara now had a kiosk and a tricycle delivery guy who helped her distribute orders. But even as life began to shift, she never forgot the one thread left hanging. Jidenna. Not a day passed without wondering where he was, or whether Jaden would ever get to call someone dad. Jaden was now a smart, outspoken boy who excelled in school and loved drawing superheroes. One afternoon, while helping him with a school project, he showed her a sketch of a man in a suit holding a little boy. "This is us, Mummy. One day I'll find Daddy," he said. Amara smiled sadly and nodded. "Maybe one day," she whispered, hoping that God would not let her child's hope go unanswered. Fate had a funny way of working. One day, as Amara was serving food at a corporate expo, her eyes caught a familiar figure walking toward a podium. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him, Jidenna, older, even more polished, but unmistakably him. She watched him speak with confidence, watched the way the crowd applauded him. She felt 100 emotions crash into her at once: rage, hurt, confusion, disbelief. He looked exactly the same, and yet here she was, wearing a food vendor's apron, her hands sticky from stew and smoke. She wanted to walk up to him, scream, cry, but her knees wouldn't move. Jaden, who had come along with her that day, tugged at her hand and whispered, "Mummy, that man looks like me." Amara's heart skipped. She turned to her son, then back at the man on stage, and in that moment, the truth hit her like a storm. Jaden wasn't just imagining things. He did look like him. It wasn't coincidence. It was blood. It was destiny. As she stood frozen, Jidenna's eyes swept the crowd, and for a brief second, they landed on her. He paused. He blinked. And then his gaze shifted to the small boy beside her. Confusion filled his eyes. Then something deeper. Amara's heart pounded. She turned away, pulled Jaden close, and whispered, "Let's go." But it was too late. Jidenna had seen them, and something told her that this time everything was about to change. While Amara battled shame, hardship, and silent tears, Jidenna was living a life adorned with praise and privilege. In the 7 years since that fateful night, he had become one of Nigeria's youngest and most sought-after CEOs, gracing magazine covers, launching tech platforms, and mentoring young entrepreneurs. His name was synonymous with innovation and wealth. But behind the polished suits and smiling interviews was a man haunted by brief flashes of a night he could never quite forget. There were moments in the quiet hours before sleep when the image of a woman with soulful eyes and laughter like honey flickered in his mind. He'd tell himself it was just nostalgia, a beautiful stranger he met on a rooftop once. Nothing more. Life had moved on, and with it came awards, deals, and high-profile women, none of whom ever touched his heart the way she did. He had everything, yet something always felt missing. The truth was, Jidenna didn't just forget Amara. He never had the chance to remember her properly. After that night, he had to fly urgently to South Africa for a sudden crisis involving stolen intellectual property. In the chaos, he lost his second phone, an old device where he had saved Amara's number. His personal assistant, thinking it unimportant, trashed it along with a stack of junk gadgets. By the time he tried to retrace his steps, he couldn't even remember her full name. He asked the hotel staff for a guest list, but privacy rules stood in his way. Life consumed him, and slowly, his one night of real human connection became a faded memory. Every letter Amara had sent over the years, beautifully written and full of heartbreak, was intercepted by clueless receptionists, overworked secretaries, or tossed into piles of unread mail his staff never thought to give him. He was unaware that just a few miles from his headquarters, a woman was being shamed for loving him. A child was growing up with his dimples and his eyes, never knowing his father's name. But destiny never forgets. After the expo encounter, Jidenna couldn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse, pacing, replaying the moment over and over again. That woman, that child. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just in the cheekbones or the eyes. It was in the aura, the energy, the gut-deep pull he felt the moment his gaze met the boy's. His assistant confirmed that the food vendor's name on the event list was Amara Obi. And just like that, the floodgates burst open. Jidenna began to remember details, the softness of her voice, her laughter, how she had looked at him with both curiosity and caution. He pulled out old journals, tried searching social media, checked hospital records, but it was like she had gone invisible. He knew he had to find her, not for answers alone, but because something inside him whispered that he had missed something far more precious than any contract or accolade. Something that could never be replaced. Jidenna became obsessed. He canceled meetings, postponed a product launch, and even ignored calls from his board members. His search for Amara became his new mission. He reached out to the expo organizers and got access to the list of vendors and attendees. But Amara had left no forwarding number, only a business name, Amos Potts. From there, he traced the small kiosk in a crowded commercial district in Yaba. But by the time he arrived, it was closed for the day. He stood in front of it, confused, staring at the laminated menu still hanging on the window. Then he noticed the drawing taped to the corner of the glass. A child's drawing, a man in a suit holding a little boy's hand. His heart clenched. He took a photo of it and walked away, his hands trembling. He went back the next day, but again it was closed. His frustration grew, but so did his resolve. He was going to see her, and he wasn't leaving until he did. Meanwhile, Amara was battling a different storm. After the expo, she had sensed something in the way Jidenna looked at her and Jaden. It wasn't just confusion, it was recognition. And that terrified her. She wasn't ready for confrontation. She wasn't ready for explanations. What would she say? Hey, remember me from that one night you forgot? Surprise, you have a son. It sounded ridiculous, painful, and humiliating. But her biggest fear wasn't that he would deny the child. It was that he would try to take him. Jaden was all she had, her whole life. If Jidenna decided to challenge her for custody, she wouldn't stand a chance. He had money, lawyers, and power. She had debt, scars, and shame. So she avoided the kiosk for a few days and stayed indoors, coaching Jaden on math, while avoiding every knock on the door and call from unknown numbers. But fate is persistent. One rainy afternoon, Jidenna returned to the kiosk again, and this time it was open. He stood across the road in his car, watching Amara serve customers. Her apron was stained with stew, and she moved with the weariness of someone who had carried life's weight alone. Jaden sat beside her with a drawing pad and a bottle of Zobo. Jidenna's breath caught in his throat. He stepped out of the car and crossed the street, his shoes splashing into puddles. As he got closer, Jaden looked up and their eyes locked. Something passed between them. Recognition. Connection. But just as Jidenna opened his mouth to speak, a loud horn blared from a nearby truck, causing Jaden to flinch. Amara turned, saw Jidenna, and froze. Her face hardened. Without a word, she grabbed Jaden's hand, left the food in the pot, and hurried away down a back alley, disappearing before Jidenna could utter a single word. That evening, as Amara locked the door behind her and pulled Jaden into her arms, her heart pounded like a runaway drum. "Did he talk to you?" she asked, searching her son's eyes. Jaden shook his head, still confused. "No, Mummy. He just looked at me like he knew me." Amara turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had wanted this moment for years, fantasized about how Jidenna would find them, apologize, take responsibility. But now that it was here, all she felt was fear. The wound of being left behind had never truly healed, and now the scab had been ripped open. She told Jaden they were taking a break from the kiosk for a while. "Vacation?" he asked hopefully. "Something like that," she replied, forcing a smile. But deep inside, she knew she was running, and eventually she would have to stop. Jidenna, meanwhile, stood outside the alley for nearly an hour, staring at the space she had vanished into. He didn't chase her. He didn't want to scare her. He wanted to earn the right to speak to her. That night, he sat in his study staring at Jaden's sketch he had saved earlier, the man in a suit and the little boy. He couldn't deny it anymore. That child was his. Every instinct, every look, every shiver of familiarity confirmed it. But what tore him apart was knowing he had missed 7 years. 7 birthdays. 7 first days of school. 7 nights of bedtime stories. And for what? A forgotten phone. A broken connection. A life too busy to notice what truly mattered. He thought about his own father, a man who had abandoned him as a boy, and realized with horror that he had unknowingly repeated the same cycle. He swore it would end with him. The next morning, Amara woke up to a letter slid under her door. No signature. No threats. Just a simple note written in a familiar, elegant handwriting. I know he's mine. I just want to talk. No lawyers. No cameras. Just the 3 of us. Please. Let me try. Amara stared at the note for minutes, her hands trembling. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't arrogant. It was sincere. And that scared her more than anything. Because part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to sit in a room with Jadena and let him meet his son. But the other part, broken, bruised, and guarded, still remembered what it felt like to wake up in that hotel room alone. Still remembered the shame, the whispers, and the years of scraping together coins just to feed her child. The next few days would determine everything. She had waited 7 years for answers. Now, it was time to decide whether she was ready to listen. Jaden's 7th birthday arrived with more tears than cake. Amara had planned something simple, a homemade chocolate cake, a few balloons, and 2 of his friends from school. But deep down, the day tore her apart. Every year, his birthday reminded her of the night she was left behind, of the first scream he made in that dark, underfunded delivery ward, and of the silent promise she made to always protect him. But this year was different. Jaden had started asking more questions. "Mummy, where's Daddy?" he whispered the night before, staring at her with innocent, hopeful eyes. Amara froze. She had avoided that conversation for so long. "Is he dead?" Jaden asked again. That crushed her. She pulled him close and said, "He's alive, baby. But he doesn't know about you." "Not really." Jaden nodded slowly, but she could see the confusion in his eyes. He was growing, and the lies of omission were starting to hurt them both. After the mini-party, when the kids left and the candles were cleared, Amara sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a letter she had rewritten 100 times. This one, she finally decided to send. The letter was raw, stripped of pride, and full of vulnerability. She told Jadena everything. How she had tried to reach him, how his number had stopped going through, how she wrote to his office, his charity foundation, even his media consultant. She didn't ask for money or pity or fame. All she wanted was for him to know that Jaden existed, that he was kind, brilliant, artistic, and carried his father's eyes. She mailed the letter the next morning, sealing it with a quiet prayer. But a week passed, then 2, and there was no response. It broke her all over again. She had believed for a moment that maybe he would show up, that maybe this time something would change. But life continued as it always had, cold, indifferent, and full of responsibilities. Jaden went back to school. The kiosk reopened. The routine resumed, but her heart remained heavy. The hope she had tried to bury was now alive again, and that made everything harder. What Amara didn't know was that the letter never reached Jadena's hands. Once again, it had been intercepted by an overly strict secretary who flagged it as a fan letter and shredded it along with promotional junk. Jadena remained unaware, and yet something gnawed at him. He had started following Amara's kiosk in secret, watching from a distance, learning her patterns, trying to understand her world. The more he observed, the more guilt consumed him. How could he have been so close yet so far for so long? He remembered how easily people had left his mother when his father vanished. He remembered how hard she worked just to put him through school. He saw all of that in Amara now. He saw his past playing out in front of him. Only this time, he wasn't the abandoned son. He was the absent father. And whether she let him in or not, he knew he had a responsibility to make things right. even if it was just by showing up over and over again, until she saw that he meant it. Fate struck again one Saturday morning during a charity event hosted by a prominent women's empowerment group. Amara had been invited to cater for the event through a businesswoman who admired her tenacity. It was supposed to be just another job: cook, serve, and leave. But when she arrived at the event venue with Jaden beside her, helping carry some supplies, she saw a familiar banner hanging above the stage. Keynote speaker, Jadena Okwudili, CEO of Zenith Tech. Her breath left her body. She wanted to flee, to call the organizer and cancel, but she knew there was no turning back. This was her biggest contract yet. She couldn't afford to ruin it. So she buried the panic deep within her and got to work. But her hands shook as she stirred the jollof rice, and her eyes darted toward the entrance every few minutes. Then it happened. Midway through the program, Jadena walked in, surrounded by media and staff, but something about his presence felt different this time, like he was searching. Jaden was the first to notice. "Mummy, he's here," he whispered, pointing toward the stage. Amara's heart slammed against her ribs. She turned and locked eyes with Jadena. Time stopped. For a moment, they simply stared. No words, no crowd, just years of unanswered questions hanging in the silence. But before she could react, Jaden tugged at her arm and said, "He looks just like me." The words pierced Jadena's heart. The resemblance was undeniable. Even his staff murmured among themselves, noticing how the boy had the CEO's exact facial features. Jadena stepped off the stage after his speech, abandoning protocol, and walked straight toward them. "Amara," he said softly, like a man reaching for a ghost. But Amara stepped back, her entire body trembling with emotion. "You don't get to say my name like that," she said, voice sharp with pain. "Not after disappearing and leaving me with a child to raise alone." Jadena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, he was truly speechless. The crowd had quieted, sensing tension. Amara didn't wait for more. She grabbed Jaden's hand and left the venue without another word. The cameras clicked. Social media soon erupted with theories. Does Zenith Tech CEO have a secret child? Who is the mystery woman with a child that looks like Jadena? By the time Amara got home, her inbox was full, and so was her voicemail. But she didn't care. Her hands shook as she packed a bag for her and Jaden. They had to disappear again. She couldn't trust him. She couldn't trust that he wouldn't take her son and destroy the only piece they had left. But Jaden looked up at her, confused. "Mummy, why did he call your name like he missed you?" She had no answer, just tears. Jadena barely slept that night. The moment Amara stormed out of the event, he knew he had to act fast. He called off every meeting for the next day and requested an emergency review of all correspondence received by his office over the past 7 years. What he uncovered shocked him to his core. Dozens of letters, some unopened, some torn, sat in storage, marked as unsolicited. All from Amara. He opened them one by one, his hands shaking as he read her words. The first letter was polite, hopeful, almost sweet. By the third, the tone had changed, angrier, desperate. By the fifth, it was heartbreak on paper. "You vanished," she had written. "And I don't want your money. I want your presence. Your son deserves to know you exist." His heart shattered. He realized then that he hadn't been abandoned by fate. He had been betrayed by his own team. People he trusted had buried the most important truth of his life beneath piles of irrelevant paperwork. He called a meeting and fired 3 senior staff members on the spot. Then he did something even more difficult. He sat in front of a camera and recorded a video. Not for publicity, not for control, but for Amara and Jaden. In the video, he explained everything. He shared how he had lost his phone, how he had searched, how he had never received a single letter or call. He showed the proof, camera footage of the old phone being discarded, timestamps, storage documents, all of it. His voice cracked as he spoke directly to Amara. "I didn't walk away. I didn't know. But now that I do, I'm not going anywhere." He asked his media team to keep the footage private for now, but he made a copy, just for her. Then he called her. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. Finally, He drove himself to her home, but she was gone. Amara had taken Jaden to a friend's house outside the city. She needed space to think, to breathe. But even there, she couldn't escape the noise. The media frenzy had reached them. People were calling her brave, others were calling her a gold digger. She hated it, hated that her son was now at the center of gossip. But what hurt most was Jaden's silence. He hadn't spoken much since the event. He kept to himself, drawing in his notebook. That night, as she tucked him in, he whispered, "Do you think he still wants to be my daddy?" Amara hesitated. "I don't know, baby," she replied softly. But he didn't look like he wanted to run. Jaden nodded slowly and turned to the wall. Amara stepped outside, sat on the steps, and looked up at the stars. Her heart was torn. She had waited 7 years for this man to show up. Now he had, but with him came chaos. And yet deep inside a small, quiet voice whispered, he didn't know. He didn't know. The next time Amara saw Jadena, it wasn't on a stage or through a camera lens. It was in person, raw, unfiltered, and unexpected. She had returned to the city reluctantly after her friend insisted that hiding wouldn't protect her or Jaden forever. She was walking Jaden home from school when his driver pulled up beside them. The door opened, and Jadena stepped out, not in his usual designer suit, but in a simple shirt and jeans, no entourage, no fanfare. Amara froze, instinctively pulling Jaden behind her. "Please," Jadena said softly, his eyes pleading. "I just want to talk." 5 minutes. Amara hesitated, then nodded. They sat on a bench at the corner of the school park, Jaden running ahead with other children, while the two adults stared at each other in silence. For a moment, neither of them knew where to begin. "I didn't get your letters," Jadena said first, handing her a thick folder. Inside were scanned images of her handwritten notes, every word she had poured out over the years. Her eyes widened, her hand trembling as she flipped through them. "They were intercepted," he continued. "I had no idea, Amara. I thought you were just a memory." Amara didn't speak. Her throat tightened as the reality sank in. For years, she believed he had chosen to abandon her. For years, she carried the shame alone. And here he was, showing proof that he never received a single cry for help. "Why didn't you come back to the hotel?" she asked quietly, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you try harder?" Jadena leaned forward. "I did. I went back that morning, but you were gone. I lost the phone where I saved your number. I asked the hotel staff. They said you were a guest of someone else. I searched. I swear I did." Amara turned away, tears running down her cheeks. The pain of the past 7 years surged through her like a current. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of the bitterness and just feel safe again. But her scars ran deep. "You don't get to show up after 7 years and expect forgiveness," she whispered. "You missed everything. His first words, his first steps, his first fever. You missed me starving just to buy him milk." Jadena swallowed hard. "I know, and I can't fix that. But I want to be here now, for him, and if you'll let me, for you." They sat in silence again, broken only by Jaden's distant laughter. Amara finally met his eyes. "I'm not ready to forgive you, but I won't stand in the way of his right to know his father." Jadena nodded slowly, knowing it was more than he deserved. It wasn't a beginning or an ending. It was something in between. And for now, that was enough. After that emotional meeting, Jadena requested one thing, confirmation through a DNA test. Not because he doubted Jaden was his, but because he wanted no room for misunderstanding or denial. Amara agreed, not out of obligation, but to silence the whispers already stirring online. The test was carried out in private. No press, no lawyers. Just the 3 of them and the clinic technician. Jaden was excited about the hospital visit, not understanding the gravity of it. He even joked, "Maybe they'll tell me I'm a superhero." Amara smiled weakly, her heart aching with anxiety. Jadena held his composure, but his knuckles were pale from gripping the chair too tightly. When the results came in 3 days later, the doctor confirmed what was already written across Jaden's face. Jadena Okwudili is 99.9% the biological father of Jaden Obi. Tears welled in Jidenna's eyes as he read the paper, his heart pounding like it would burst. For the first time it was official, not just a feeling, not just a suspicion. He had a son, a real, breathing, beautiful boy he had never known existed. He turned to Amara, who was visibly shaking, unsure of what would happen next. But instead of celebrating, Jidenna knelt in front of her and whispered, "I'm sorry. I wasn't there. I should have been." Amara didn't say a word, just placed her hand on Jaden's shoulder. "This is your father," she said softly. Jaden blinked, then looked up at Jidenna with wonder. "You're really my daddy?" he asked. Jidenna nodded, tears streaming down his face as he pulled his son into a hug. It was clumsy, emotional, and long overdue. For a moment, the years melted away, and all that remained was a man holding the child he never knew he had. But as touching as the reunion was, reality wasn't far behind. The media was in a frenzy. Rumors about Jidenna's hidden family had already gone viral. News channels speculated about legal battles, while online trolls accused Amara of trapping a billionaire. She received anonymous threats. Her business saw a sudden spike in customers, but she also lost a few contracts from those uncomfortable with the drama. Jidenna tried to control the narrative. He arranged a press release stating he had only recently discovered the truth and requested privacy for his son. He also offered to relocate Amara and Jaden to a safer home, but Amara declined. "I don't want your money," she told him firmly. "Just your presence." Those words echoed in his soul. It was never about wealth or headlines for Amara. It was about fatherhood, about responsibility, about finally doing what should have been done 7 years ago. And now, the world was watching to see if he would rise to the occasion. The headlines spread like wildfire. CEO's secret son uncovered after 7 years. Single mother's letters ignored for years. Now her son is a billionaire's heir. Amara's quiet life was ripped open. Reporters gathered outside her home. Old acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly resurfaced with fake concern and selfish motives. Even people from her past, who once mocked her for being a bastard bearer, now claimed they knew all along. Jaden looked like someone powerful. The sudden spotlight was suffocating. Jaden, too young to grasp the severity, was confused by strangers taking his photos and asking invasive questions. One afternoon, a nosy journalist barged into her kiosk, pretending to be a customer, and secretly recorded her. That video, showing Amara scolding the reporter and shielding Jaden, went viral, sparking mixed reactions. Some called her brave. Others labeled her dramatic and attention-seeking. The shame she had fought so hard to bury was now trending online. Jidenna, enraged by the chaos, immediately called a press conference, not to defend his name, but to defend hers. In front of flashing cameras and probing microphones, he said what many men never had the courage to admit. "Amara Obi is not a gold digger. She is the mother of my son and a woman of strength who raised a brilliant child alone while I lived unaware. I failed them both, not by choice, but through ignorance. And now that I know the truth, I will protect them with everything I have." The room fell silent. That video, too, went viral, but this time it turned the tide. People began to sympathize. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Amara and hashtag Real Fatherhood started trending. Some brands even offered her business partnerships to support her resilience. But Amara remained cautious. "Public sympathy is like the wind," she told her friend. "It changes direction too fast." Still, the pressure didn't stop. Jaden's school became overwhelmed with media attention. Other parents filed complaints about unwanted disruption. The principal called Amara in and gently suggested she transfer Jaden elsewhere. That night, Amara wept. Everything she had built was unraveling again. This time, not because of absence, but presence. Jidenna offered to move them to a secure estate, away from prying eyes. This time, Amara said yes, not because she needed saving, but because Jaden needed peace. As they packed their few belongings, Jaden looked at his mother and whispered, "Is Daddy coming with us?" Amara hesitated, then said, "He'll visit. A lot." The wounds weren't healed, But something had shifted. The man who vanished was now showing up. And as the car pulled away from her small apartment, Amara held Jaden tightly, wondering what the next chapter of their lives would bring, and praying it would be softer than the ones before. The new estate was beautiful, quiet, green, and secure. But to Amara, it felt less like home and more like a gilded cage. She appreciated the space, the privacy, and especially the peace it brought Jaden. But with every step she took in the well-polished marble halls, she felt like an outsider in a world she had never asked for. Jadena had given them one of his properties, not far from where he lived, and offered her complete independence. No strings, no conditions. He paid for Jaden's new school, hired private security to ensure they were never bothered again, and even furnished the house to match Jaden's favorite colors. But Amara remained emotionally guarded. Each act of kindness from him felt like a bandage over a wound that had never stopped bleeding. It wasn't just the years he missed. It was the fact that while she suffered in silence, he lived like a king, completely unaware of the life he had helped create. Jadena, for his part, was a man unraveling. Though his public statement had turned the tide in his favor, the consequences behind the scenes were severe. Key investors began to withdraw from his company, citing instability and personal controversies. His board members urged him to step back from public appearances, claiming the brand was too tied to his image, and that the image had been compromised. He began losing sleep, haunted by the question of what could have been. Each night, he watched old videos of Jaden that Amara had reluctantly shared with him. His first birthday, his school recitals, his drawings. Jadena couldn't believe he had missed so much. Even worse, he felt like he didn't deserve to catch up. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" he once asked his driver, who simply shook his head. "That kind of pain no one forgets, sir." Jadena knew then that this wasn't going to be about making a grand gesture to earn his way back in. This would require time, humility, and a willingness to show up, even when he was unwelcome. Amara saw his efforts. He attended Jaden's school plays, helped with homework, showed up every Saturday for soccer practice. But each time he came around, she felt a strange pull of emotions. Resentment, admiration, sadness, and something else she didn't want to name. He was trying, and that scared her, because she had built walls so high around her heart, and now they were starting to tremble under the weight of his persistence. One evening, after Jaden had gone to bed, Jadena stopped by with a box of old baby clothes he had purchased years ago, gifts he once bought for a child he never found. "I didn't know it was for him," he said quietly, placing the box on the table. Amara looked at him for a long moment and then whispered, "I don't hate you, Jadena, but I haven't healed either." And with that, she walked away, leaving him in the living room, staring at the box of missed moments and what-ifs. As Jadena tried to rebuild the broken bridges of his personal life, his professional world began to crumble beneath him. A group of board members, led by his longtime rival and fellow stakeholder, Raymond Osei, began orchestrating a silent coup. They used the scandal surrounding Jaden to question his leadership, citing his emotional distractions as a liability to the company's future. At first, Jadena ignored the murmurs, but soon contracts were being frozen, partnerships delayed, and trusted allies began resigning quietly. The media, which once praised him for his transparency, began publishing opinion pieces that questioned his stability. Headlines like "Has Fatherhood Derailed Nigeria's Tech Icon?" dominated the news cycles. It was the ultimate irony. Finally, being a father cost him the very empire he had built. One particularly brutal meeting ended with Raymond proposing that Jadena take an indefinite leave of absence. "You've done great work, Jadena," Raymond said with a sly smile. "But right now, the company needs steady leadership, not emotional reunions and PR cleanups." The room was divided, but the vote swung in Raymond's favor. Jadena, for the first time since founding Zenith Tech, was removed from daily operations. It felt like a death sentence. He sat in his car afterward, motionless, staring at the city skyline. Everything he had sacrificed for, his late nights, his empty relationships, his constant push to be the best, was now slipping away. And for what? A son he never knew he had? A woman whose eyes still burned with betrayal? Yet despite the chaos, a strange peace began to settle in. For the first time, he wasn't running toward success or away from failure. He was simply still. When he visited Amara that evening, he didn't mention the boardroom coup. He just brought a sketch pad for Jaden and helped him draw superheroes. Later, as he was about to leave, Amara noticed his unusually quiet demeanor. "You okay?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "They voted me out today." She paused, her breath catching. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shrugged. "Maybe it's what I needed." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a weary acceptance. And that, more than anything, softened something inside her. She realized then that he wasn't just showing up, he was sacrificing, giving up power, comfort, and pride for the chance to be present. It didn't erase the past, but it proved something else. He was changing. Not for publicity, not for control, but for the little boy who called him daddy, and the woman who had every reason not to forgive him. Jadena's resignation became public news the next day, and the world reacted with its usual chaos. Some applauded his choice to prioritize fatherhood. Others mocked him for letting emotions ruin his career. But none of that mattered to him anymore. His days were now filled with playdates, parent-teacher meetings, and learning how to braid Jaden's stubborn hair. For the first time in his adult life, he was living, not performing. He and Jaden grew close quickly, watching cartoons, playing video games, and having deep conversations about superheroes, art, and dreams. But with Amara, progress was slower. She appreciated his consistency, his gentleness, but her heart remained cautious. She had been burned too deeply before. She couldn't afford another heartbreak, not when her son was now emotionally invested too. Then came the afternoon he showed her the video. It was the same one he had recorded months earlier, the footage where he shared how her letters were never delivered, how he had tried to find her, how he never stopped wondering about the girl on the rooftop. He handed her a flash drive and said, "You don't have to watch it now. But one day, you should know how much I wished I had known." That night, after Jaden went to bed, Amara sat alone and played the video. As Jadena's face filled the screen, speaking with a rawness she had never seen before, she broke down. Every wall she had built began to crack. Not because the video made everything okay, but because it proved he was human too, flawed, hurt, and searching. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as someone who had always mattered. The next morning, she invited him for breakfast. Just the three of them. Jaden lit up when he saw his father walk in with a bag of pastries. They ate, laughed, and played music while Amara watched quietly from the kitchen. When Jaden ran off to show his dad a new drawing, Jadena stood and walked over to her. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded. "For the first time, I believe you didn't abandon us. You were just as lost as I was." Their eyes met, and in that moment something shifted, not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it, a bridge forming over years of pain. And as the morning light streamed through the window and laughter echoed in the home, it felt like a new chapter was finally being written, one with healing, hope, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at love again. It had been a few weeks since that breakfast, and while Amara and Jadena had not formally defined their relationship, something tender had settled between them. They no longer walked on eggshells. Conversations flowed more easily. Jadena had become a permanent fixture in their daily lives, driving Jaden to school when he wasn't busy, helping with homework, and often staying late just to watch a movie together. Yet even with this steady rhythm, Amara held on to her guard. She couldn't afford to fall too quickly. Trust was something he had to earn, not just through presence, but through proof that he could be consistent through the storms. And deep down, part of her still feared that the world they were building could vanish again. So when she noticed Jaden sitting quietly at the dining table one evening with pen and paper, she didn't think much of it. He was always sketching something. But this time, he was writing. Jaden had watched his parents from a distance for weeks. He wasn't old enough to understand everything, but he could feel it. His father trying so hard, his mother hesitating. He missed things sometimes, like how they looked at each other when the other wasn't watching, or how his father sat a little too long in the car after dropping him off. Jaden had always been more intuitive than most kids his age. That night, He decided to do what no adult could, bridge the gap. In his own innocent handwriting, he penned a letter addressed to both his parents. Dear Mummy and Daddy, it began, I'm happy now because I have both of you in my life. But I want us to be together all the time. I think you still love each other, even if you don't say it. Daddy, I know you were not here before, but you're here now. And Mummy, I know you're scared, but maybe if you let him stay, we won't be scared anymore. Love, Jaden. He folded it, drew 2 hearts on the back, and slipped it under his mother's pillow. When Amara found the letter later that night, her entire body trembled. She sat on the edge of her bed, tears rolling silently down her cheeks as she read each word. It wasn't just what he wrote, it was the innocence, the hope, the silent plea of a child who just wanted a family. She picked up the letter and held it to her chest, remembering all the nights she prayed for strength to raise him alone, all the times she cursed Jadena's name, and all the moments she now saw him trying, truly trying, to be the man they both needed. That same night, she called Jadena and asked him to come over. When he arrived, she handed him the letter without saying a word. He read it once, then twice, then folded it back and looked at her with tear-filled eyes. I love you, he said for the first time since that night 7 years ago. And I want to fix what I broke. Not just for him, but for you. Amara didn't speak. She just reached for his hand, and this time she didn't let go. From that moment on, things began to change. It wasn't a fairy tale overnight, but a steady transformation rooted in honesty, shared healing, and mutual respect. Jadena began spending more time at their house, helping Amara in the kitchen, assisting with her growing food business, and even building a website for Ama's pots that quickly went viral. With his connections and her talent, orders began to pour in, and Amara had to hire more hands. She no longer felt like a burden in his world. She was now thriving in her own right. Slowly, she began to allow herself to feel again, to laugh more freely, to talk about things other than survival. They went on walks together, had deep conversations at night, and reminisced about their first meeting on that rooftop. Jadena even admitted he still had the scarf she had left behind that night, a soft reminder of something real in a world full of appearances. But it wasn't just Amara who had changed. Jadena, too, had evolved. He had shed the mask of the untouchable CEO and embraced a life of intention and emotion. He no longer chased deals for validation. Instead, he spent his mornings making breakfast with Jaden and his evenings planning charity initiatives for single mothers. He didn't care that Raymond had temporarily taken control of Zenith Tech. He had discovered a different kind of power, the power to heal, to protect, to love. One day, he drove past the same hotel where he and Amara had first met. He parked and just stared at the entrance, his heart aching with nostalgia and gratitude. So much had changed since then. But somehow, despite everything, the universe had brought them back to where it all started, only this time, with more clarity and purpose. Amara noticed the changes. Every day, her heart softened. Every day, she caught herself smiling without fear. Jaden, too, glowed brighter. He would run around the house saying, "Now I have a mummy and a daddy who cook together." His joy was contagious, his laughter healing. One Saturday morning, as they all sat outside having breakfast in their new garden, Jaden asked, "When are we going to be a real family forever?" The question made both Amara and Jadena pause. They looked at each other, and this time there was no hesitation in their eyes. "Soon," Jadena replied, holding Amara's hand. "Very soon." And Amara, for the first time in years, nodded without fear. She had spent so long surviving that she forgot what it felt like to live. But now, in the presence of a man reborn and a child filled with light, she finally felt ready to start over, not as a broken woman, but as someone who had conquered pain and found peace. It was Jaden's school's annual family picnic, a lively event held in a quiet, tree-lined park outside the city. Parents arrived with food baskets, children raced through obstacle courses, and music floated through the air like laughter. Amara wore a yellow dress that caught the sun just right, her smile brighter than it had ever been. Jadena, dressed in jeans and a white shirt, carried the picnic basket with Jaden clinging to his arm like glue. They played together, laughed, and danced to childhood songs. Other parents couldn't stop talking about how beautiful their family looked. Amara caught a few glances and whispers, but this time it didn't hurt. She was proud of her story now, proud of her scars, her son, her strength, and the man who had returned to right his wrongs. Later that afternoon, the school's headmistress announced a fun talent show for the kids. Jaden went up on stage with a drawing and a poem he had written. When he finished, the crowd clapped warmly. But just as he stepped down, he turned to the microphone and said, "There's one more thing. I hope my mummy and daddy don't get angry, but I really want us to live together forever." Everyone laughed. Amara covered her mouth, blushing, while Jadena stood frozen. Then Jaden added, "So daddy, you better hurry and do what I saw in that movie." The entire audience burst into laughter and applause. Amara looked at Jadena, her eyes wide with amused embarrassment. But he wasn't laughing. He was reaching into his pocket. As the laughter died down, Jadena took slow steps toward Amara, then dropped to one knee in front of everyone. The entire park went silent. He held out a small velvet box, opened it to reveal a beautiful gold ring, and said, "Amara Obi, 7 years ago, I let you walk away without a goodbye. You raised our son with grace, strength, and love that I will spend the rest of my life trying to match. I don't want to miss another day. Will you marry me?" Amara gasped, her hands covering her face, tears already streaming down. The crowd cheered wildly, and Jaden jumped up and down chanting, "Say yes, mummy. Say yes." She looked at Jadena. This man, who had once been a mistake, now transformed into the answer to her prayers. With trembling hands she nodded, then whispered the words that would seal a new chapter. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was everything Amara had never dared to dream. Held in an elegant but intimate garden ceremony, surrounded by family, close friends, and the people who had witnessed her struggle. The day shimmered with warmth, laughter, and redemption. The media, surprisingly, respected their request for privacy, and what remained was a celebration not of fame or wealth, but of resilience, healing, and love rediscovered. Amara walked down the aisle in a sleek ivory gown, her hair adorned with tiny yellow blossoms, Jaden's idea. Jadena waited for her at the altar, not with nerves, but with quiet gratitude. He looked nothing like the powerful CEO the world once feared. He looked like a man finally at peace. As Amara drew closer, she felt her entire journey flash before her eyes, the shame, the pain, the heartbreak, and then the transformation that brought her here. She was no longer the abandoned girl from a one-night stand. She was a woman standing tall beside the man who had once been her deepest wound and was now her strongest partner. Jaden stood proudly as the ring bearer, beaming as the officiant spoke. The vows were not dramatic, but honest. Jadena didn't promise perfection. He promised presence. He promised to never let silence replace communication again. He promised to honor the pain she endured alone, even though he hadn't caused it intentionally. Amara, in turn, promised to forgive, to grow, and to let herself be loved again, not as a woman desperate for attention, but as one who now understood her worth. The guests rose to their feet in thunderous applause as they sealed their vows with a kiss. Jaden clapped louder than everyone, running to hug them both, shouting, "Now we're a real family forever." That moment, captured in a single photo, Amara in tears, Jadena grinning, and Jaden's arms around them, became a framed portrait on their living room wall. It was a symbol that even the most broken stories could find light at the end. In the months that followed, their home became a sanctuary. Amara's food business grew beyond expectation, with branches opening in other cities, and her face gracing culinary blogs and business panels. Jadena, free from the corporate rat race, launched a foundation for underprivileged mothers and began teaching entrepreneurship in rural communities. He didn't want another mother to feel forgotten the way Amara had. He also co-authored a book titled The Letter I Never Got, a raw, honest account of fatherhood, regret, and finding redemption. Jaden blossomed academically and emotionally, telling anyone who asked that his dad was a superhero and his mom was the strongest woman alive. On quiet nights, the three of them sat in the garden, drinking Zobo and laughing at old stories. Sometimes, Jaden would bring up the park proposal, giggling at how he forced their love to finally bloom. They would laugh, hold hands, and thank God for second chances. Because what began as a one-night mistake had become the love story they never saw coming. And this time, no one was walking away. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.